Well, hello there, everybody. Back on the live stream today, although today seems to be less of a live stream and more of a live record and then stream later on. I'm not sure if it's one of the thin wires between here and Europe that's causing the problem, or if it's just bad mojo on my side. Yeah, so today we've got, this afternoon we've got UK-based Dave Newton. He's a former marine biologist, and he says here, is best described as globe-trotting, adventure-seeking travel photographer who also shoots wildlife, commercial portraits, action, street, and photography as the opportunity arises. Sounds like a generalist specialist. It's my favorite kind of photographer. So I'm going to hand over to Dave Newton, and yeah, we'll see what he's got to show us today. Thanks, Dave. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lockdown 21. Welcome to lockdown and coronavirus world. I guess, as Quentin just said, I'm a bit of a globe-trotting photographer, and clearly that's not happening right now. I think anyone that has globe-trotting in their title is more sofa-trotting, I think.
Well, you can also you could globe-trot to the country of lounge and the country of kitchen. You know,
exactly. It's more like I've visited Bedfordshire a lot.
Yes, yes, and I went to Romania. I went to Romania. Yeah.
Nice.
Right,
Yes.
Quickly.
Before these jokes get any worse. So yes, I normally travel quite a lot, and as Quentin said, I like to shoot anything and pretty much everything. I say with the exception of weddings, but don't tell many people, but I've done one or two of those as well. Not necessarily because I wanted to, but mostly because they were friends who obviously had something on me, persuaded me that I should photograph their wedding. Anyway, no, I normally, I guess, shoot, it's travel, it's landscape, it's wildlife. And Quentin said to me that he wants to see what I'm really passionate about shooting. I didn't respond because I thought I'd just tell you now, that's basically everything. If I've got a camera, I'm passionate about whatever the subject happens to be in front of me, which is exactly why I've avoided putting myself into any one pigeonhole. So a generalist specialist is quite a nice way of putting it. It may be a little over generous, but the checks in the post maybe it'll be about as quick as the broadband between here and there.
It could be a generalist specialist or a specialist generalist. I find myself in a very similar goldfish bowl. So go for it. Love it.
So what you're going to see is a variety of pictures. Here's just straight off a splash screen of just a collection of stuff, and you'll see that it, look around, it encompasses quite a few different things. You'll see some of these bigger as we go. Here's a bit of me at work. You see a lot of it does involve the natural world. I like being out in the wilds. I like shooting on location. Probably, I say more than I like shooting the studio, but I find studio photography very interesting and technically challenging in itself. But my heart is always in the natural world. So if it's sand dunes, that's the Mesquite sand dunes top left. Top middle, that is me sitting on the end of Trolltunga in Norway. I had to set up a camera. That's quite a way. It's a 2,000-foot drop below the end of that precipice, actually. I'd set up a camera, and then you have to queue to get out onto that. I had to persuade someone to push a button when I waved at them, or wave, count to 3, then push the button. Or cheetahs, that's in the Masai Mara in Kenya. It was a mother and her cub. Bottom left, whale watching in Mexico, and bottom right is, where's that? Death Valley. That's a drone selfie just outside Death Valley. Anyway, so the natural world is kind of my natural habitat. I have spent a lot of my life traveling. I'm up to 60, just under 60 countries, I think now. There are a couple of holes. I've not done Canada, Greenland. I've not done Eastern Europe and bits of Asia, and I've not done Central Africa or South America, but they are definitely on the list. And unfortunately, due to coronavirus, I was actually going to get 6 new countries on my list from the middle of February to middle of March, but I had a 1-month round the world trip cancelled, which was exceptionally frustrating. It was like the ultimate wildlife safari. We were due to go to Japan, then China. You can see why it got cancelled. Then the Philippines, then Borneo, India, Rwanda, Madagascar, Kenya, and then finishing off in the US, all for wildlife. So that would have been a pretty exceptional trip, and I'm just hoping it happens next year and we get to get on planes again. Anyway, moving on. So let's start with a landscape. I'll quickly flick you through a couple of examples of some of the stuff I do. So this is Death Valley, probably one of my favorite places in the US to shoot because it's so varied. And as we know, photography is all about light. So I guess I'm a light hunter. I was a friend of mine that I've worked with before. I was talking to him a couple of years ago, and we were talking about what sort of stuff we film and photograph. And I said, Brian, if you had to sum me up, what would it be? How would you describe me? And he said, someone that plays with light, which I thought was a really nice way of describing it. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant what the subject is. You just play with light. You manipulate light for whatever it might be. So it might be a landscape like this, where perseverance was key. This was 4 mornings or 4 nights camping in a car to get to this place every morning, just in the hope that the light would work. And 3 mornings it didn't. The 4th morning it did, which was great because it was my last day. I had to go home after that.
It's like we were talking to Carl Smarenberg the other day. And you know, they went out sitting in this fantastic spot, a bit of an overhanging cliff thing, and it rained and it rained and it rained and it rained and it kept raining, and then 20 seconds, sun came out, beautiful light, shoot, and it was overcast again. And you know, you just never know. You know, it's the luck of the draw. It's a beautiful shot, by the way.
Thank you. It's the great thing about working out in the wilds is you never quite know what you're going to get, and one of the best skills you can have is to learn to work with what you've got. Basically, you try and make the most of whatever nature presents you with, and sometimes you get lucky, it's absolutely spectacular. Sometimes it's not quite so spectacular and you have to work a little bit harder. Okay, moving on, a bit of architecture, a bit of cityscape. So for landscape now, I've got a bit of cityscape. This is in Taiwan. That spiky building on the left is I think the 2nd or 3rd tallest building in the world. It's called Taipei 101. It certainly has the largest tuned mass damper in the world, which is a massive ball that moves backwards and forwards to help it deal with earthquakes, because Taiwan experiences something like 18,000 earthquakes a year. Yes, Quinton, I saw your eyebrows go up. My eyebrows went up when I read that too. I was like, what? How do they? No, that's not possible. But most of them aren't felt. Quite a lot of them are, though. Anyway, this one's a bit more about location finding. So the challenge of working out in the wild is trying to find a location. And in this case, I kind of stumbled across it. I'd spent a month driving around Taiwan, and I was looking for places to shoot. It was actually it was a commission for HTC, the mobile phone company, who are Taiwanese, and they commissioned me to travel around Taiwan for a month with their latest mobile phone to take pictures of anything and everything, show the beauty of Taiwan. It was a pretty good commission. And when they said to me, how long do you want to have traveling around the country? And I went a month, and they went, yeah, that's fine. I realized I should have said longer.
You should have said 6 months, a year, you know. You're such a newbie, such a beginner.
I know, just honestly. But no, so that was I mean, I've been to Taiwan quite a few times, actually. It's a spectacular country. If you've not been, I highly recommend it. Just let coronavirus die down. But it's really beautiful. It's incredibly varied. It's not very big, actually. It's surprisingly small, but it has a lot of big mountains down the east side. Lots of big mountains down the east side, which is great if you love mountains. And things like this 2nd tallest building in the world. And also, they're just super friendly people. It's probably one of the few places you could go not knowing anybody, meet someone in an airport, and they would direct you around their entire family all around the country, and you just have people to stay with wherever you went. Really lovely. So I was driving around, driving along a freeway, motorway, and I happened to stumble across this view. I saw it, and I was like, oh, how do I get there? Parked up, got the map out, started looking, and you know, managed to come up with this, and ended up visiting this location several times. So I've got this daytime, sunrise, sunset. It was a location that actually worked for a lot of things.
Very cool.
Let's move on to the next one. Now, I love flash. I'm a big fan of flash. I think if, as a photographer, you're not using flash, obviously certain caveats. If you're doing air-to-air photography, you're probably not going to be using flash that much.
Although I don't know, I'm sure you could hire a second helicopter with an Elinchrom 1200 or something, with just without any diffusers. I'm sure you could light that plane.
I think it would be doable if you really wanted to.
Maybe we should approach someone, take a month and fly and try that.
I'm in. I'm totally in. I'm right
Sorry,
there.
I'll stop interrupting.
No. I'm absolutely in with that. I think who can we talk to? I wonder whether Roger from Canon would give us some budget to do that.
I'm sure he would.
I think it would be a great air-to-air tester for 1DX3, and seeing how it performs. I think that would be really good. Anyway, so this surprises most people. This is not lit with studio flash. This is speedlight flash. So these are Canon speedlights, little pocket, take everywhere, AA battery powered flash. And that is a guy genuinely leaping from one pillar to the other. I see Quinton's just dashed and grabbed a speedlight from behind him. For people that don't know what a speedlight is.
Yeah, there we go.
It's a 600EX Mark 1.
Yes.
Yep.
EXRT Mark 1.
EXRT Mark 1. There you go. So that's what I use. Great little flash guns. There are 4 of them in this, and they're all acting as one group. So they are providing one beam of light to light him. And it was deliberate. I quite wanted him popped out, and I wanted the bottom of the rock stacks to be a bit more silhouette-y, because it really focuses the attention on him, given that he's much smaller in the frame. So yeah, he's genuinely jumping between these 2 rock stacks on a bike. The guy's a lunatic, frankly. We pulled up at the beach. He was going to ride around on the rocks, and I looked at those 2 stacks and I said, Andre, do you reckon you can jump between the 2 of them? And he went, yeah. I was like, it's like 30 odd feet high. And he went, yeah. And I was like, but it's death if you fall. He went, yeah, it'd be fine. So he did. And the back of that right hand stack, actually, he rode his bike up it. It's kind of at a bit of a slope, maybe a bit more like this. He kind of bunny hop sideways, then rode a bit, then bunny hop sideways up to the top. Carried his bike over and then jumped back, and he did it 3 times. All the while with me set up with some flash guns.
Saying, please do it again. I didn't get the catch light in my eyes.
I missed it. Yeah. Go again. And please don't die. Yeah, and obviously, when you're working even with 4 flash guns, they're firing out quite a lot of power. So this is not a burst. This is a single frame. You've got to time it. And timing is obviously absolutely key. There's a bit of luck, there's a bit of judgment. The other very interesting thing about this picture, or I think is very interesting, is the lens that it was shot on. So in fact, Quinton, you can unmute yourself and you can have a guess. Hopefully you don't remember this. What do you think that was shot on?
I don't think it's that wide. I don't know. I'm going to go 70 to 200 at 70.
No, it's not. It's on a lens that you'd probably never think of shooting quote unquote action sports.
Then I'm going to say, because you've mentioned in one of your talks before, a tilt shift lens.
It is. Oh, it is. Good work. It's a 17mm tilt and shift lens.
So that you get the verticals.
So that the stacks are still vertical. Exactly. And also, one of the things, if you're shooting action sports, I can't remember who told me this years ago, but it's probably one of the tips that stuck with me. If you're ever photographing sport, remember that you're not necessarily photographing the sport. You're photographing the environment in which the sport happens. So it's like a landscape picture with something happening in it, and it makes for much more interesting shots. I could have shot this on a long lens and just had him tight in the frame, and you would have none of that danger value of him being 30 feet up over a rock stack. You'd have none of that spectacular sunset sky going on.
Absolutely.
So think more about the environment in which the subject is doing what they're doing.
Yeah, when I was shooting weddings, I suppose I'd kind of consider myself as a landscape wedding photographer, because when we did the couple portraits, they were normally in this sort of frame. They were about as small as that guy on the bike, somewhere in the bottom left or right, and it was them in the scene, which is what I wanted to get. That for me it was the interesting part, with a bit of off-camera flash, just to pop a light on them and draw them out.
Sure.
So yeah, I understand that landscape sports photographer description perfectly.
Cool. I'm glad it resonates. Okay, next up. Now this is oh goodness, come back. There we go. Now this is something a little different. This is aerial, so this is not me in a helicopter. This is a drone. Last year, I was lucky enough to spend a month on that boat. We sailed across the Atlantic. Started in Antigua and sailed from Antigua to Barcelona, all the way across the Atlantic. This is just a little bit of, for variety. It's drone imagery. Drones, obviously, if you'll excuse the pun, have taken off massively. Yeah, go on. I know that was bad, wasn't it? I couldn't stop myself. I'd started, I had to finish. Have taken off massively in the last few years, and it's something that it brings a whole new perspective on what you're doing. This was actually towards the end of the journey. This was approaching the Gibraltar Straits. So you can actually see there's a couple of ships in the background if you look carefully, sort of on the horizon to the left of the yacht. And as I say, I was shooting a lot of content throughout the whole trip. I was filming and taking photographs with an EOS R. I was using an Atomos Ninja 5 as well. I actually had almost my editing suite with me, in that I had my G-Tech RAID box with me as well, my SSD RAID, so that I could download and edit. Only a little shuttle box, like yay big. And yeah, it provided a wealth of photo opportunities. In fact, I think you might see one or two more images from that later on. So that's just something a little different, a bit of drone. I think drones, while the restrictions are getting tighter and tighter, they are worth persevering with, because they do give, they open up a new lease of life to your photography, to your imaging, a bit more to your creative arsenal. And then there's a little bit of wildlife. So this is a humpback whale breaching, doing what we call a twisting breach. So I run whale watching tours down to the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. I didn't go this year for obvious reasons, but the last couple of years I've been, and it's always a pleasure to photograph any sort of wildlife, but particularly things like this. We actually normally go to see the blue whales, but where we go has blue whales, has humpback whales, has fin whales, has orcas, has dolphins, manta rays, whale sharks, sea lions. It's just an incredibly rich ecosystem for marine life. And obviously, as a former marine biologist, it's something that's quite close to my heart. So getting the opportunity to go and see these guys, this is actually surprisingly challenging to photograph. A blue whale on the surface is quite easy to photograph, but a humpback whale breaching is quite hard, because you don't know exactly where they're coming from, because you can't see them.
and you probably, I'm taking a guess here, you can't get him to do it again. Hold on, catch light.
Yeah, back it up, go again. To be fair, actually, this humpback breached maybe 10 or 15 times in a row, but not in the same place. So it might be that he breaches and you're all set and you're ready, but he then breaches again 100 meters off to the right, or 100 meters further away from you, or 50 meters closer. You just don't know. So it's an incredibly reactive form of photography. And actually, for those of you that are Canon users, this is where really understanding the Canon autofocus system comes in handy. So anyone that is a Canon user, on any of the more recent cameras, you'll know that you have some case studies for autofocus, case 1 to 6, and they control 3 different settings. So they control AF point auto switching, acceleration, deceleration tracking, and essentially the first one, which is how the camera responds to obstacles, which is AF tracking sensitivity. And that's the one that's really interesting, because normally you're going to take that and probably turn it down so the camera is not super responsive, because otherwise, if an obstacle moves between you and your subject, the camera is going to refocus on that. In this instance, there's not likely to be an obstacle between me and a humpback whale, and I want the camera to start focusing absolutely instantly. The moment something appears under that focus point, I need the camera to start focusing. So for me, in this situation, I would take that tracking sensitivity and I'd turn it up. Literally, at the moment that whale breaches, I swing onto it and the camera is focusing immediately.
And are you using a
and
DX
that's where,
with this, or
this is on a 1DX Mark II. Actually, this was a 1DX Mark II. I've also photographed them on a 5DSR, which is absolutely not your obvious sports or wildlife camera, but I'll show you a sports picture shot on a 5DSR in a while, actually. Yeah, this is a 1DX2 with 100 to 400 mm lens. But literally, as soon as I swing to it, I want that camera focusing. And that's always worked for me. And that's where really understanding your kit as a photographer, you can be the most creative person in the world, have the best eye, but if you don't understand what your kit's doing, you're always going to be missing shots. So for me, I think absolutely understanding everything your camera is capable of, even if you never use half of it, for the times when something comes up and you're like, oh yeah, oh no, there's that thing in the camera, that's going to make that easier. Yes, that's why I learned how to do that. So yeah, remember that if you ever get the opportunity to photograph breaching whales, AF tracking sensitivity needs to go up to the right, to the plus side.
It's also a good thing to have the things that you think that you'll use most often in your custom menu, so that you literally just go to one pane and you know, without having to try and now search, is it the red menu, which number, etc.
Yeah,
so yeah,
exactly. So if you use that my menu, the green menu's on the right hand side, you can put up to 6 in each one of those. You know, the most common things you use. Just remember, while you might put format in there because you're going to use that a lot, or at least you should be using that a lot, don't put it at the top. Or after you've formatted, move away from that option. Because otherwise you can find yourself formatting cards very quickly, quicker than you want. Okay, moving on. I love street photography as well. And street photography for me is very much it's something I have to train my eye to do. I find sometimes I walk around and I'm completely blind to what's going on, but gradually as I walk around a bit more, I open my eyes, I see a bit more. This was in New Orleans, and this looks like it was a setup shot. The lighting looks very cinematic. It's got that real film feel about it.
This is too beautifully lit to be a grab shot.
This is a single grab, one single frame while I was walking. It's in New Orleans. I was walking down the street one evening. I saw this lady brushing the steps. I turned, I took one frame and I carried on walking. The time between seeing the shot and the picture being taken and me moving on was probably about 2.5 seconds. It's the light. I mean, you know, you see that the light just talks to you, right?
Yeah.
If you're not seeing that light, you really need to work on your visualization skills. Okay, because that light was just spectacular. The amount of light, you know, the way it's falling off beautifully from those lights in the trees, a little bit of light in the background providing depth through the doorway, the fact that she was just perfectly underneath the lights, it all worked. And to add to that, I guess for me, the number 818 was my school number when I was at school. That was my student number at school. So maybe that's what caught my eye. I don't know. Anyway, so that's a bit of street. And then we come on to some portraits. So this was a shoot that I did out in the Middle East back end of last year. I'm a big sucker for black and white portraits. I think they have a lot of strength and power. That doesn't mean I don't do color. I love color as well. You may have noticed that my color work, I have a particular look. It's quite vibrant. I'll talk about that in a moment. But really, you know, photographing people, I think, is always interesting because they're so varied, and you can't use the same technique with every person because, you know, what makes Quentin look good is going to make me look terrible. And I mean, I'm always going to look terrible next to Quentin, but you know, he's all blushing now. You have to find a way to make people look good, and that is about, in short, staring at them. I find when I'm talking to people, I stare a lot, or I don't consider it staring. I look intently, and some people can find that slightly disconcerting. But it's because as a photographer, I'm always looking for the light, for the angles, what's going to work, what's not going to work. Yeah, I guess that's the interesting challenge of people photography. So that is, in the first however many slides that was, 8 slides, kind of a nutshell of why I like photographing lots of different things, and why I find it all very challenging, and why I don't want to just say for the rest of my life I'm going to photograph one thing. Okay, let's move on. So we're going to look at landscapes in a little more detail now. This is, you may recognize this from the first image I showed you. So this was actually a different trip. A couple of months later. Obviously, location scouting is very important. Sometimes you get lucky the first time you go there, sometimes you don't. So keeping a mental record, keeping a notebook of places you've been that would work for pictures, I think is a very worthwhile thing to do. Things like researching where you're going to be in advance. You know, we have a lot of apps available now, things like the Photographer's Ephemeris is great. It allows you to plot where the sun's going to be at any particular minute, any time into the future for anywhere on the planet, which if you're a landscape photographer is great because you can work out exactly, where you need to be and when. So for example, there's a shot I've got in the Lake District, which I've not yet managed to take, but I know it's going to happen. And I have a reminder in my calendar because it's only going to work in November. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, at 3 o'clock on Thursday.
Exactly. Well, actually, no, it's about 5:54 in the morning.
Okay.
I need the sun just cresting a horizon to get the shot that I want. But, you know, I've got that reminder set in my calendar so that if the weather's looking good next November and I'm allowed to travel outside my house, you know, I can, if I'm not doing anything else, I can make my trip north to the Lake District to try and get that shot. So this was about revisiting a location. I actually took a friend of mine on a photo trip back. We did a little bit of a road trip around Death Valley after I'd been a couple of months earlier. So I had a lot of locations set up, places I knew we could go. And it's effectively the same shot, but looks entirely different. And that's the beauty of landscape photography. It will never be the same twice. In fact, it's the beauty of all photography. No, you can never exactly recreate a picture unless you are in control of every single aspect of it. And I remember I read a book years ago. It was a fiction book, but it was a bit about a photojournalist, and something I read in there, again, a bit like the sports photography advice, has always stuck with me. It's about anticipating the moment, because, you know, we listen to Cartier-Bresson talk about the decisive moment, and it's very true. And the reality is, if you see the shot in the viewfinder, you've missed it. Now, okay, the change in milliseconds for this image, for example, is minor, but for other things could be quite great. And so you have to anticipate that moment. You have to get yourself on location, set up, ready for the shot you want, and then push the button at the exact moment that you want that picture taken. And it becomes quite metaphysical, I guess, maybe a little bit spiritual, but the world is in constant flux. And that's why if you see it, you've missed it, because that exact moment in time has passed. So you need to train your anticipation, and that's where the whole planning thing comes in. Sometimes though, you don't get to plan. I was actually supposed to be shooting, I was shooting a documentary about a guy who does Ironman triathlon, and we were shooting in this location, and I decided I couldn't possibly not photograph this landscape. I actually have a picture of him running over this landscape as well, running along the edge of that lake. But this is there's Mont Blanc over on the right hand side, it's the Aiguille Verte directly ahead. It's a place called Lac Blanc, and it's, you know, this one I couldn't plan, but I saw the picture. You know, there are quite a few photographers around here, but nobody was working with the reflection, and I couldn't quite understand why. I thought that reflection just was crying out to be shot. When you've got a body of water that still, you pretty much are obligated to photograph it.
Yes, because normally it's not. That's still the shot in was it Taiwan? The
Yes,
underneath
yep,
the bridge that
yep,
had quite a lot of movement in it. It's very seldom where it's
it
just
did.
like you flipped it. This is not real. This I love it. So nice.
So this is that's because this is a lake. The one in Taiwan was a river. Obviously, it's a
Sure.
constant flowing body of water. You will see. I think I've got some more reflection pictures. I'm quite big on reflections for landscapes. I love the water. Having talked about the whales and marine biology, I love the water. So I'm always drawn to a good reflection, even if it's another tip for you. Even if that reflection is in a puddle. I know you don't get a lot of rain in South Africa, but the times that you do get rain, look at puddles. If you're in the city and you see a puddle, get down on your stomach and get the camera right up against that puddle and see what the reflection looks like. Because I guarantee there are pictures to be had. And even if you don't have a puddle to hand, if you have a phone, which everyone has a phone, right? And it's got a glossy screen protector on it. Stop me if you've heard this one before. If you shoot here, you can turn your phone screen into a reflection, into a beautiful reflection.
I thought you were going to steal my my idea there. Just take a 2-liter bottle with you filled with water, and you
Just
can
pour it on the
filter it
ground.
out wherever you want it.
My back does not let me carry 2 liters of water in addition to camera kit. Now that's all gone. Actually, a little side note: I was talking about this image in the Middle East at a workshop I was doing, and I was doing a landscape talk and talking about a lot of my images will have strong foreground interest, rocks particularly if I'm out in the wilds. And I said, yeah, I carry a bag of rocks around with me, and I'll throw them down on the ground as my foreground interest. And a couple of people laughed, and then a woman went, really? I don't think I could carry rocks around with me. My back, no, I'm too small. I've got camera. I was like, it was a joke. I was joking, but thanks for taking it seriously. And it was at that point that I realized that sarcasm doesn't necessarily translate across international borders.
No, it definitely doesn't. When you get the deadpan and you realize you can't backtrack, you can't go forward, just
yeah, you're in a hole, and there's no way out of that.
Yes.
Anyway, okay, so moving on. Interestingly, actually, having put this picture up, the picture on the left that you're going to see next, this picture, this landscape in France, Lac Blanc, is the one time I've had camera kit stolen from me. There's a refuge off to the left. I stayed in the refuge after this picture was taken. Someone stole my tripod. And the next picture, this one on the left, is the one time somebody tried to mug me.
Wow.
Actually, third time someone tried to mug me. Tried being the operative word, they failed. So this goes on to looking at tilt shift lenses. There's a bit of cityscape. These are both Lisbon. The bridge on the right is the Vasco da Gama Bridge. It's a very, very, very long bridge, very beautiful at sunrise. And the one on the left is about it's a market square in Lisbon, not far from the port. So this would have in times past been full of marketplaces. But for me, having mentioned foreground interest, it was about finding those converging lines, those verticals, or not verticals, sorry, the converging diagonals of the tile work that created the depth and scene. And yeah, the attempted mugging was two guys appeared out of that walkway on the back left-hand corner, walked right down the middle of my picture and stood either side of me. And I was kneeling down, obviously very low camera position. I was kneeling down for the picture, and they started speaking to me and yada, 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 so on and so forth. Eventually, I realized that they were going to try and mug me, so I stood up. And they weren't expecting me to be 6'4". They thought better of mugging me and left.
I was just going to say, how did you negotiate to get the memory card out of the camera before they took the stuff?
No, being 6'4" has its advantages, particularly in Portugal, where they're all quite a bit shorter than that. I stood up and one of them was looking just above my elbow, and he was like, yeah, this is a bad idea. It's a very bad idea. Time to leave. Okay, there you go. There's another reflection for you. Now, if you want a picture like this, is in China. This is Beijing. It's the Forbidden City. If you want a picture like this, now is a really, really good time, apart from coronavirus, because the skies probably look like this. Normally in China, the skies are not blue. I've been to China a couple of times. Every time I go, I seem to get blue skies because I seem to pick my times. Either the IOC, as it was this time, the IOC were visiting, so they turned off all the factories a week before, or there was some other international event going on. They turned off all the factories, and it meant that all the smog disappeared. And I was able to get some beautiful pictures. But again, now this is a moat. This is a moat all the way around the Forbidden City, hence why it's such a still body of water.
That's beautiful. Love it.
And you know, just briefly on composition, you know, people say don't split your image in half. Well, that's split in half and in half again. The subject is bang in the middle. The horizon is right across the middle. I think, you know, all of these compositional rules are there not to be followed 100%. They're guidelines, not rules. I get very frustrated when people talk about the rule of thirds, because what they really mean is the guideline of thirds, because it's only an approximation. It just gives you a starting point. But if you've got a reflection like this, for the love of God, put it in the middle of the frame, right? Because why wouldn't you? Yeah, we are naturally predisposed to symmetry as well, so you don't have to offset everything. Okay, and then a little bit about changing your perspective. This is a poppy field. Poppies are tall but not massive, so this is about getting flat on your face, or flat on your back, as it was in this case. Shooting up into the sun. Certainly in the UK, we're often taught that you shoot with the sun over your shoulder. I was a picture editor at a wildlife picture library, and if you'd shown me 100 pictures from people in the library, I could have told you what part of the world they were from, because people in various places of the world use light differently. Eastern Europe have a very particular aesthetic. The Japanese have an aesthetic. The Americans have an aesthetic. You know, UK, maybe it's familiarity and contempt, but the UK photographers often have an aesthetic, and it is very much light over shoulder. Which, you know, is missing out on all of the different other places you could put light to create interesting pictures. And it's not just about taking pictures from your standing height. Otherwise, life would be really, really boring.
Absolutely. What lens is that with?
That was on a 1635 f4, on an EOS R, in fact.
Okay.
So, having mentioned about getting down low, this is about getting down low. Getting down close, I won't show you the resulting picture of this, but this is just an example of, you know, your camera is expensive, yes, but it's a tool to do a job. And if you want to get a picture, you put the camera where that picture needs to be taken from. So obviously you can see here I was trying to use that little bit of rock as a foreground interest. Yeah. That was one that came out of my rucksack.
Yeah, the one that you carried with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I was all set up, ready for this shot, but it meant that, you know, the elevation of the camera was crucial, and I needed to be just a little bit above the water level. And to that point, if you're using a tripod, tripods are not designed to be used at their maximum elevation. Okay, if you're going to do landscapes, before you get your tripod out, work out where the camera needs to be. Go up and down, raise the camera, up, down, up, down. I'm going to pick up a camera, which is not a DSLR, but it's a G7X Mark III. You're going to go up and down and side to side until you find exactly where that camera needs to be, the height it needs to be, because that will massively affect the relative amount of foreground, midground, and background that you have in the scene. And you need to choose that height before putting the camera on the tripod. So you choose the height and set the tripod to that height. Don't put the camera on the tripod and just, it's wherever it ends up, because you're then not taking control of your pictures.
That's a good point.
Sermon over. A little bit of panorama as well. Now this is going to be a series of a couple of pictures. So this is actually a 12-shot panorama to give you the full view. So this is in the Lake District. It's Buttermere Valley. So that lake is Buttermere, and you can even see from this picture quite how still that body of water is. And then, so if this is the stitch panorama where you can see the path going down, we go to the single image, which is a 24mm tilt and shift. Okay, and you know, this is in itself quite a nice picture. Works quite nicely. But there's another picture in here, and it's about being able to see pictures within pictures within pictures, and using lenses that you wouldn't necessarily think of using. So everyone, you say landscape, everyone thinks of a wide angle. It's a 1635, it's a 24-105, it's a 24 tilt, 17 tilt. People don't necessarily think of a 100-400 with a 2x extender, which is what that is. So if I go back, and you look at the bottom end of that lake from exactly the same camera position. Yeah? Yeah. About finding a shot within a shot. both of them are interesting pictures in their own right. And there is never just one picture from any location that you're in. There's always a variety of pictures that can be had. And that kind of leads me on to trying things as well. So probably one of the more Frankenstein setups. This is a 24mm tilt and shift with a 2x extender, which gives me a 48mm.
Wow.
Yes, I could just use a 50mm tilt and shift, but I don't have one of those. And it's an extra chunk of weight in the bag. So a 24mm tilt and shift, a 2x extender, the control ring adapter on an EOS R, which is a lovely setup. You'll notice that the lens has got what's called a tilt and shift frame, a Rigetti TSE frame around it. That means that I can mount off the lens rather than the camera, makes things a bit more stable. Also allows me to shift vertical to horizontal while keeping the lens centered on the subject. And it also means from a shifting perspective, I'm not creating parallax shift because the camera is shifting like an old view camera rather than the front of the lens shifting. So those of you that understand tilt shift, if you mount from the camera and you move the lens, you get a parallax shift because the lens goes up and down. If you mount off the lens and you move the camera goes up and down, and that changes your perspective in terms of your verticals without adjusting any parallax. If you're going to do a lot of tilt shift photography, I highly recommend one of these.
Yeah, it takes every time I break out a tilt shift, I always start sweating because to try and find the spot and then to tilt, and it takes a while to get your head around it. So I can imagine that whatever you can do to make life a little bit easier
is always a benefit.
Absolutely.
So actually, for my landscapes, and this surprises people, I never use tilt. I only ever use shift. Mm-hmm. Because I don't see the need of tilt in a landscape. If I want more depth of field, I will focus in the appropriate place and close the aperture down. The shift for me is that when I see landscapes that are shot on a 1635, I know they're shot on a 1635. Mm-hmm. Even if it's a mountain, which theoretically has no verticals, you still get that kind of converging vertical going on. And I'm very attuned to it, and it bugs me, which is why I do the majority of my landscapes on a tilt shift lens, because I much prefer to see everything square. And it kind of leads me on to this. This is obviously a tilt shift where, I want everything to be in the correct perspective. Now, it's Great Wall of China. The top tip for this is if you want to get sunset at the Great Wall of China, it's quite, in theory, difficult because they close the wall. But if you can explain to me how they can close however many thousand kilometers of wall, I'm all ears, because it's not really possible. All it means is you just have to walk down afterwards. You can't get the bus or take the slide or get a car or whatever. You have a long walk back down. But for this, I basically hid in a guard tower, in a disused guard tower at the back end of the wall, about as far as you could go, waited for everyone to disappear, and then had the entire wall to myself for sunset.
Fantastic.
Which was wonderful, really. Okay. Location finding. This is back in Taiwan, actually.
I remember this one.
China at the moment. So again, about location finding, a bit like the bridge, where I saw it while driving. I'd seen a picture of this location, but I couldn't figure out where it was. And I'd seen it when I first arrived to do my month tour. And I can't think where I'd seen the picture of it. Maybe in a postcard or in an airport or something. Anyway, it's stuck in my mind. I thought that's a pretty cool location. And having driven all around the country, I literally couldn't figure out where this was. I looked on the maps, yada, yada, yada. I really couldn't work it out. It was on my last couple of days when I'd driven back into Taipei, back into the capital city, which is where the people I was staying with lived. I drove around this ramp. And as I went round it, I went, oh, hang on, this might be what I've been looking for a month. Then I had to get the maps out again and figure out exactly how to get here, which involved walking through a couple of homeless camps. When you're 6'4" and white, you stand out a lot in a homeless camp in Taiwan. A lot. They pay you a lot of attention. Fortunately, again, they're all quite small and they're very respectful, so I had no trouble there. But yeah, I then had to clamber through some bushes along an edge and I actually took a rope with me because I realized I probably needed to tie myself on just in case, because it's quite a steep drop down to that road. But yeah, I'd found the location. So even if you're not taking pictures, keep your eyes open for pictures. Okay. Oh no, go back. Well, 2 from top of the mast now. I like to put myself in slightly awkward positions. This is not a drone. This is not a remote camera. This is me at the top of a 33-meter mast. So this was, again, this was part of that Atlantic crossing. This was while we were at anchor before we left. So we were in the Caribbean at the time, hence the beautiful water. But I decided that I wanted a picture from the top of the mast. So I climbed up the mast and duly hung out for a while. One of the people there is my now fiance. I proposed while we were mid-Atlantic. It was quite funny. You'll guess where this is going. I was up there. I was like, girls, you know what's going to make this picture even more valuable? I think one of them said something that sounded like fur cough, or it was pre-coronavirus, so I'm not sure what they were saying, but something like that. Anyway, I had to then up the ante. Notice the same 2 girls lying. This was mid-Atlantic, so when we're at anchor, the boat's doing the mast moving a little bit like this. If it moves 3 degrees either way, I did the maths on this. If it moves 3 degrees either way, it's like a 10-foot swing. Okay. When you're under sail, you don't move 3 degrees. You move quite a lot more than 3 degrees, like this. So at the top of that mast, you're being swung all over the place, and just trying to frame up is a challenge because you're trying to hold yourself still with your legs. You're in a harness. You're trying to make sure you've got a good grip. You're trying to frame and look. And actually, I found that the flip out screen on the EOS R for this was really useful. It made life that little bit easier because I didn't have to get my head right against the viewfinder. So score 1 for a flip out screen. Okay, moving on. A little bit of black and white. Black and white landscapes. You'll notice my images are normally quite vibrant. But black and white, I think, works for landscapes as well, particularly when you've got light and shadow. And this is coming back to talking about shooting across the light or into the light. Don't just always have the sun falling over you. If you've got sand dunes like this, you want the light raking across them when it's low because you create those highlights and shadows, and that's what provides texture and interest.
That's really nice with the texture in the sand and in the clouds.
They kind of mirror each other, don't they?
Yeah, lovely.
Okay, now having said that, there's another reflection. I told you I love my reflections. This is also Miracom. This is in Norway. And having said it, you can put it across the middle. In this case, I chose not to because I wanted more of that rock formation up the top because I quite like the textures over the top edge. So again, it's not hard and fast rule. These things are all about trying things out. Now, I do very little post-processing to my images. I like to get them right in camera. So to that end, I tend to set up my camera in a particular way if I'm doing landscapes. So, excuse me, I like my images to be quite punchy and vibrant. And so I use the landscape picture style, and you can have this tip for free, the landscape picture style, and then I turn the saturation up +1, and I turn the contrast up +1. And that makes my images look how I like to see them. It's pretty much straight out of the camera. So my post-processing is very limited to dust spots, maybe a little bit of contrast.
Are you using Canon's DPP or are you using the JPEGs?
I'm a big Canon DPP fan. So I love Canon's DPP, but actually I don't do much with it. The reason I like DPP is because it gives the best raw conversion quality of any raw software out there. I've talked about this many times over the years. But in short, if you're using a Canon camera, why not use the software made by the people that made the camera? Because they know what's going on better than everyone else, right? So
I'm sure Roger will send you a check for that as well.
I'm sure he will. Not that anyone pays to use DPP unless you're using.
No,
DPP
I'm talking
Express
about the just keep punting it. He loves it.
he loves it as well. I know, as does Andrew Averley.
Yes,
big DPP fan. But yeah, I think it gives the best quality. And I've told people this over the years, and I've actually had people go away and say, oh, I tried it. I've been a Lightroom user, or I've been a Capture One user, or whatever. And I had a challenging image. I just couldn't get it right. I threw it in DPP, bang, right first time. There is a reason for that.
Mm.
It's because the guys that make the software sit next to the guys that make the sensors, sit next to the guys that make the processors, and they all know what they're doing and they all talk about it. And everyone else is just having to reverse engineer from an API that Canon gives them. And they don't bother doing it to the nth degree because they're trying to support so many cameras from so many manufacturers.
Absolutely, yes.
So yeah, DPP for the win. Anyway, okay, let's get on to some portraits or bit of portraits. Now we'll call this sport portrait. This is looks like it was shot in a studio. I told you I like my flash.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you 2 pictures of this guy. This guy had a heart transplant, did an Ironman. He was the guy that I was photographing running around in the Alps. 2 speedlight flash guns, one directly in front of him mimicking the sun, literally right in line with the sun, and one behind him providing the cut line. Now, the point of putting one directly where the sun was coming from was that the sun wasn't strong enough to allow me to drop the background to create that differential. So I'm always looking for light differential to create that contrast, to create that color palette. So it was high-speed sync, which allowed me to bring the exposure down in the background, while I then fired a light on him to make sure he wasn't too dark, and put one down his back to provide that bit of cut line so he had some separation. Moving on, so I'm going to show you 3 pictures of him actually. This is him cycling. Again, there's flash in here, probably one of the most technically challenging pictures. This has got ND grads to hold the sky down, and we go back to talking about photographing the landscape with something happening in it.
Yeah.
So this is a landscape picture. If you took him out, it's still a nice landscape picture. You've got ND grads to hold the sky down. You've got a bit of light in the front left foreground, because otherwise that was going to be too shaded, and I wanted the texture and detail of grasses. And then you've got a little bit of light, and I've left it in there. And I don't know if you can see my mouse. Maybe you can. No, you probably can't. So just to the left of him, there's a little light patch of grass. There was another light firing across from him to mimic the sun, to create the light on his left-hand side and that very soft shadow onto the right-hand side. Three attempts. The first 2 went wrong because of him, because he's German.
Obviously, yes.
Of course, I told him to cycle 3 feet out from the white line. He thought I meant meters, so he was on the other side of the road. I had to tell him to aim for a point instead. Okay, moving on. This is him, same guy. This is what I was actually photographing, filming him training in the Alps. This is shot with a 5DSR, that well-known sports camera. Sports camera that everybody uses. It has great autofocus. You just learn to work with it, right? It's got all the same settings. And understanding your kit allows you to do things with it that other people possibly can't. So 5DSR, 70 to 200. Again, speed lights. You can see the big shadow on the ground. That's from the sun. Speed lights from the right-hand side meant that he was not a silhouette.
How many of them have you got in that group of speed lights?
That's 2 speed lights, 2 600 EXs in one group, firing through an umbrella. And bang, off you go. He runs towards me. I hit the shot. Done. Thank you very much. Move on to the next one. And for me, it was about, you've got that bit of yellow, which forms that lovely pathway, but it's very strong red, very strong blue, great primary colors. And I can hand on heart say that this has had 0 processing. This is what it looked like when it came out of the camera. We'll move on. We'll do a little bit of wildlife, so a bit of macro. Now we know that depth of field is crucial in all things. In macro, what you got to remember is your depth of field is like this. It's not because of your aperture. Top tip: the thing that controls your depth of field more than anything else is not your aperture. It's how near or far you are from your subject. Get closer to your subject, depth of field comes down. Further your subject, depth of field goes up. So this is about getting in nice and close. Lovely green wash background. Again, trying to keep, in this case, the color palette very simple. You've got that strong pink, lovely green, clear background, helps your subject stand out. This is with the 100mm macro, the L series one with the IS. This is handheld. This is not a drugged dragonfly or anything.
I was just going to say that's a very tame dragonfly from with 100mm.
Yeah, just having the image stabilizer allows your shutter speed to go down and keep yourself stable, which is important at low shutter speeds and high magnifications. But also the 100mm just gives you that little more working distance, not obviously as much as a 180, but it's about moving in very carefully, very slowly, so as to not spook them. Okay, well, I won't dwell much on these because you're South African, you know what lions are. But in this case, it was about finding the eye contact, waiting for that moment. He's tearing the water buffalo apart, but there's still that incredibly strong eye contact as he looks through, and you know, that piercing stare. And black and white, because I think it's quite a graphic image, and I think it suits a black and white more than it suited colour. Then we have Malika the cheetah. You saw the picture of me with the 2 cheetahs beforehand, so this was just the mum. This is not super common to photograph a cheetah on a 1635. Even less common to photograph a wild, this is not tame, she's an entirely wild cheetah, a cheetah on a 1635 using a 1 meter gold reflector to light her.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that looks, at that distance, the speed light's not going to be broad enough for that. That's got to be a reflector. What were you carrying with you in that bag of rocks?
Well, you know, I'm probably the only person that's taken a 1 meter reflector on safari with them. But hey, it came in handy, so
it works.
Win one for me. Yeah, actually, when she jumped up, I was like, "Oh my God, take pictures!" And because it's not often you're that close to a wild cheetah. And then my brain kicked in. I was like, "She's a silhouette, Dave. It doesn't work. You need some light." And I had a speed light, and I toyed with it. I was like, she might not like this flash, and if she doesn't like the flash, that's not going to be good. But with a reflector, I can start it a long way away and move it in gently, and you know, find where she's comfortable with it. So yeah, a reflector on safari.
Beautiful.
Andrew will undoubtedly be having kittens if he's watching this. Okay, a lion, just a nice lion portrait, really. But this is the kind of thing that when people photograph wildlife, they like to do, is get that frame filling portrait. But what I want to get to is to say, don't always think about the frame filling portrait. Think about setting your subject in the environment. So this is a muskox in Norway. Yes, I could do a lovely frame filling shot of this. It's a baby muskox, but actually showing where it lives, where it has to survive, is more interesting to me. It tells more of its story. It gives you a bit more about it. Okay, understanding your subject. I found a pool of water. This is a dunlin having a wash. I found a pool of water. I'd observed that there were several birds coming in to wash, so I laid myself down in the water and the goose poo, just to get that shot right along the water. And in terms of breaking the compositional rules, again, this bird is looking out of frame, but if I'd framed it on the other side, you'd have none of that dramatic splash going on, because that would all have been out of frame. So again, don't stick hard and fast to those rules. Be flexible with them. I should probably put these two the other way around. So this is the uncommon picture of a whale. People normally go for the tail or the breech. This is a humpback whale, but showing why it's called a humpback. And for me, it's probably one of my favorite whale pictures, because I just love the stack of the back and then the mountains. You've got like mountain, all stacked up, shooting slightly into the light, so you can still see the mist from, it was a very still evening, where he'd taken a breath, and the moisture from the breath was still hanging in the air. And that's where being able to shoot into the light came, because if I'd shot with the light, the mountains would have been lit up, so the breath wouldn't have stood out. It wouldn't have been lit in anywhere near the same way. So shooting into the light. This obviously being the more common form of a whale picture. This is a blue whale tail. You want that water curtain, you've got to wait. Yeah, probably not an awful lot more to say about this one. Then we have, I guess, if you're not going to get a whale tail, you might get this, the biggest breath in the animal kingdom. Again, shooting into the light. So the mountains are dark. The light reflects off all of that moisture vapor in the breath. And those plumes can be 30 feet high. And you hear them from about a couple of miles away.
And how many speed lights were on the support boat for that?
Yeah. I think all the speed lights in the world. Okay, then something a little different. And you've seen this before, Quentin, so you'll have to play along. But for anyone watching, you have seen this before, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
You have. So you know what it is. Okay, because for those that don't, you're probably going to say that it's a turtle. It looks like a green turtle. It's not. It's a person. So this was part of a project that I'm still slowly working on about plastics. So that's a person body painted to kind of tell the story of how plastics are impacting the world. And then this is something I'm working on right now. So you've not seen this one because this is quite new. It's also body painted, in case you didn't get it, but this is obviously for the Australian bushfires. The plan is to auction this image off as a print to raise money for the Australian bushfires. I was all set to release it, and then coronavirus happened. I was like, well, it's just going to get lost in the news. So
yeah,
we're sitting on it at the moment. But again, it's something a bit different to what people normally think I do, a bit more artistic. I didn't do the painting, I hasten to add. But the number of people that have looked at it and gone, where did you photograph a koala? I was like, no, look again, keep looking. And I suppose then the more obvious one might be something like this, which is, this is just more of an art piece of someone in a field of sunflowers. And I love body painting. I love working with body paint artists because I think they're way more creative than I am, way more talented than I am. I just shoot their creations, but they give the opportunity for really lovely pictures. Like this is probably one of the most sensual pictures I've ever taken. You don't need naked people to make a sensual picture. In fact, just less is more in this case. Yeah, just the textures and the colors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's something that I really enjoy photographing, and will continue to do so. Okay, we're going to move on. I'm aware that we're running out of time, so a little bit of street stuff. There's going to be a couple from a temple in Taiwan about looking for the light, but looking for the moment. So obviously this little boy, the moment is the eye contact with him. Yeah, there's a lovely shot of a family sitting there praying. He's clearly not into whatever they're praying about. He's absolutely not down with that at all. He's more interested in the big white guy pointing a camera at him. But waiting for that moment, waiting for him to look, creates that decisive moment. Or looking for the light. So there are pools of light in temples are great places to shoot. There are pools of light. So here I just positioned myself, knowing that there's a pool of light falling here, and waiting for people to walk in. The longer you stay there, the more you kind of blend into the background. You just kind of sit quietly. The more you're moving around, waving the camera, you stand out and people don't act naturally. But if you just blend yourself into the background, people kind of ignore you, and then you can get these beautiful candid moments. Or this is in Vietnam, a bit of a fisherman. Again, look at where the light's coming from. It's coming from kind of behind him. He's backlit. He's got that beautiful rim light going on around him, and it's picking up the net against what is therefore a dark background because it's not lit. Little story here, very briefly. I'll be super quick, Quentin, I promise. This was a favourite picture, but one where I was momentarily terrified. I'd seen this. It was in Vietnam. I was riding on a little rice paddy bike, and obviously I'm quite tall. I could see over the hedge, and I saw this scene. I just got off my bike. I don't speak a word of Vietnamese. I got off my bike, I opened the gate, and I walked in. I was like, hello, kind of waved the camera at them, and they didn't seem to do much. I was like, fine. I crouched down, took a couple of pictures. And then the lady stood up, and just out of frame to her right, there was what is effectively a broomstick with a massive machete on it, which she picked up. And I was like, oh, this has gone very badly, very quickly. She disappeared off around the back of the house, and she came back about 2 minutes later with some fruit off of one of their fruit trees.
Wow.
She just started hacking it up and feeding me. No words were passed at all. But I walked in, I'd invaded their privacy, taken some pictures, and then I got fed fruit. I'm sure if you did that in Joburg or Cape Town, or if I did it in London, I'd be lynched.
Yeah, the outcome of Machete anywhere else in the world might have had a very different,
very different
outcome.
Okay, a little bit more street. So again, decisive moment. I saw the guy walking down the street. This is in Beijing, one of the Haotongs, a little back street. I saw the guy walking down with his dog. I stopped, I crouched, I got in position, and I waited, and I hoped the dog would walk through the light. And it did, just on the edge of it, where it nicely balanced. The dog was kind of like weaving all over the place, and it just happened to come together. Sometimes you get the shots, sometimes you don't.
Yep.
And you ride your luck. You have to be ready for them. You pre-visualize as much as you can, but you have to be ready for them. You have to be able to respond quickly. Like this, again, back in Vietnam, this little forest boy running around, stopped in a shaft of light for about 5 seconds, just long enough for me to take a picture. It looks like it was shot with flash.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. That is one stream of light coming through the tree canopy.
Beautiful.
Capture, and then off he went again, disappeared into the undergrowth. I could talk for hours about this one. This is obviously Tai Chi in China. A former national kung fu champion, very scary, and a complete wuss in his pajamas. Was complaining about how hot it was walking up the hill to get to this location. Lit with flash. There's a speed light flash off the left and an umbrella to mimic light coming through the trees to light him up, but slightly in front of him so that it creates the reflection in the water, which again provides that depth. Without that reflection, it would be quite dull.
Yeah.
But the reflection is what makes it. Skip on. We're getting there. I promise we're getting there. This is in Kenya. This is in a charity school in Kenya. So many pictures from this. Children, they say never work with children and animals, but I find photographing children, particularly in this part of the world, really exciting because they're so innocent and so excitable that they give you so much. In this little boy, he was clearly the class clown. His teacher was telling them all to be quiet, and he decided he was going to get in on the act. And this is an 85mm 1.8, which for those of you who want to shoot portraits, the 85 1.4, the 85 1.2s are beautiful, but they're expensive. The 85 1.8 is a stunning lens for not a lot of money. Optically beautiful, really lightweight, great to carry around with you as well. There we go. So now we're on a bit more classical portraiture. So this was a fashion shoot I did for the handbag brand. Obviously very Breakfast at Tiffany's themed, little black dress in London. I had an assistant for this one, walking along with her. So she's walking towards the camera. I'm walking backwards, and the assistant is walking with her, keeping the light in the right place so that she's lit just enough so that she stands out, but it's nicely balanced with the background, so that's your balanced fill flash. And then you're going to see the one of the athlete again, because I want to show how these are like 4 years apart, but I have a style of how I use flash, and I very much like that dropped background look.
Yep.
Stand out, and that's why I put it back in again, because it gives you that, like, you need to work on your style. Yeah, everyone has a style. People say I have a style. I'm still not sure what it is, but I do know when I'm photographing people in the landscape, I probably default to this more than anything else. I like a bit of high-speed sync. I like to make the background a bit more dramatic. Again, speed lights for the win.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then just a couple more, a little bit of abstract. So this is those sand dunes again, and this is to say, don't get upset if you're not using the latest and greatest cameras. Okay, this is not shot on a big DSLR. I thought for more than a year after I took it that I'd taken it on my 5 DSR. It was only when I was preparing a talk that I discovered actually I'd taken it on an EOS M5, little mirrorless compact thing. And then I remembered back to why. It was because the 5 DSR is full frame, and I only had a 70-200 with me, and I couldn't get the composition I wanted. And I'm incredibly lazy when it comes to doing stuff on the computer. So I knew if I'd shot it full frame, I'd never have bothered going back to the image and cropping it. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just take the 5 DSR off and I'll put the M5 on it. And that gives me my 1.6 crop. That gives me the field of view that I want. Bang, thanks very much.
And the efficiency that you apparently want as well.
Exactly. It saves all that time sitting in front of a computer. So yeah, you can create pictures with any camera. Don't feel sorry, Roger, if you're watching, don't feel you have to rush out and buy a 1DX Mark III. Yes, it will give you certain advantages for some things, but you can create fabulous pictures with pretty much any camera, as long as you know why. I love my abstracts. I told you I love water. So these are just some abstract water images. Whenever I'm on the water, be it by the water, on a boat, whatever, I'm always looking for how water plays with light. Sunrises, sunsets, middle of the day, whatever. And also introducing some slow shutter speed to create a bit of motion, something a little bit more artistic. There is a never-ending palette of colors and pictures to be had, because they will never be the same twice. You move by a millimeter and it's changed. The waves have moved, the water's moved, so on and so forth. And then I guess finally, while we're all stuck in lockdown, yes, there are loads of things that you can do around the house. I've been keeping myself busy photographing my dog. So I have a little Hungarian Wiesler puppy. He's 6 months old tomorrow, in fact. And I've been having fun photographing him with a GoPro, actually. This is a little GoPro Fusion. I sometimes put it on the harness on him. But just because you're locked down doesn't mean you stop being creative.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to stop creating pictures. It's why I think what you're doing with this Lockdown 21, Quentin, is fantastic. Giving people challenges, giving them ideas, things to go and photograph. If you've got pets, they are great photo subjects. You've probably always wanted to take pictures of your cats and dogs and never really got
Now
round to it. It's one of those things, I'll get round to it when I've got time. Well, now you've got time, okay? So photograph all those things that you said you wanted to. Push your creativity, try and do something a little bit different. Like the picture bottom right is, they're both shot with GoPros actually, but I've just got hold of this little beastie here, the 8 to 15 mil fisheye. So expect at some time in the not too distant future to see some fisheye pictures, like with a proper camera, fisheye pictures of Otis, looking, you know, from the ground up, looking up at that great big
Yeah,
shot.
I've seen him all over your social media for the last couple of days.
Last couple of weeks. Well, basically, it's been, you know, social media has been so full of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
I was like, what can I do to brighten the mood, to, you know, bring a bit of color and a bit of laughter? And obviously he's got these fantastic ears and that stupid nose, and it seems people respond to it. They love a bit of a laugh, you know. It brightens their day, brings a bit of cheer, and you know, we could all do with that, I guess. So I'm going to wrap up and say thank you very much if you've sat through all of this, including Quinton showing me the minute markers, which is why I may have got a bit quicker towards the end as they were counting down. I was like, no, there's more to go, there's more to go. Thank you very much for sitting and listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've maybe picked up a few tips that, even though you can't go out right now, you can utilize for things at home. And obviously once all this disappears, you can get back out. In the meantime, as I say, be creative with what you've got at home. But as I started by saying, understanding your camera is super crucial, and you never have time to sit and understand your camera. Now you do. Get the manual out. It's written in weird languages, but persevere with it. It will tell you what your camera does, and then you can sit and have the time to think about when you might use that, because that will, probably more than anything else, that will improve your photography. Knowing what your camera does, not having to take it away from your eye and go, what button am I twiddling? Oh, hang on, in the menu, what does this do? Going, I'm doing this, I need that, and being able to go straight to it means you don't miss moments, and your picture will be better. Because if Quinton will let me have 1 extra minute, photography is part art and part science. And if you're too busy thinking about the art part, you're not thinking about the science part. And if you're too busy worrying about the science part, that being focusing and exposure, you're not thinking about the art part. And what you need is to kind of bring the two of them together, and make them as seamless as possible. And that's where great pictures happen. And one day I'll get there. I persevere, and I hope one day I'll reach that nirvana.
Fantastic. That's a perfect segue into also, the more you use your camera, the more the muscle memory is there, and you don't have to think about, you know, my biggest hurdle that I found moving from the 5D Mark IVs to the EOS Rs is the ISO button is not there anymore. It's now the record button. So what you need is either RF lenses. Well, all I'm saying is that my muscle memory is such, and I need to.
You've been doing this for years, and now you can't.
I need to retrain. But the point is that, you know, just by knowing where things are, you don't have to, you know, look down. Where is it? And like you say, go through the different menu options to try and find it. And yeah, we've got time. Go and practice.
Take a quiet evening, sit in your sofa, and try and change as many settings as you can with the camera to your eye.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're not going to do that when you're next on safari. You're not going to do that when you're next watching a landscape. Sit now while you've got the time. Camera to your eye, and just, okay, where do I need to go? What do I need to change? What fingers do what?
Exactly.
Change stuff, and I guarantee it will improve your photography.
Absolutely. David, thank you so much. It was fantastic. I certainly want to go out and get a bag of rocks, go and find a yacht, and some German runner in the mountains, and shoot some stuff. I thought your pictures were lovely. I've seen a lot of them before, which is why I thought you'd be perfect for these sessions. So yeah, thank you so much. Fantastic. Thanks for staying so long over the time that you initially promised that you would. I know it's, you know, it was hard for you.
yeah. I was rapidly running out of things to say.
Yeah. So thank you so much. It was fantastic, really inspirational, and yeah, good luck. Get you on in the future, and we'll see what things have changed. Thank you.
Perfect. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, David.
Good luck. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Cheers.